Welcome to the Win All Day Everyday podcast presented by Prairie Hockey Academy. I'm Barrett Kropp. I'm the co-host with Justin Simpkins. Justin is the director at Prairie Hockey Academy, and I serve as general manager, and I also get the privilege of coaching the U15 prep team that competes in the CSSHL. And we're just into, 3 months into our podcast, and lots of great things have been happening in the hockey world. We just, last week was Thanksgiving, and lots of, we're into the thick part of the season, Justin, and we're really excited about where all of our 4 teams are going.
Yeah, I can't believe we're already past Thanksgiving. It's October. 4 teams are traveling. We're doing well. It's been an exciting start to our year. It's as our 7th season, Barrett. It's some days it's hard to know that we made it 7 seasons and we're here, but it's a lot of fun. It feels, it's been a smooth start to the year. We've got a great team. And the podcast has been a blast as well. And so welcome for our listeners here for our 13th episode.
Yeah, this is exciting. We've had some brilliant guests come on the show, over the last 3 months now, and everything from, Adrian Vlaka with all his work he does out in Toronto with some of the greats of the game like Bedard and McDavid and everyone in between. Last week having Melissa Irachi on with all the nutrition stuff now that she's had on 2 different episodes for us. And the challenge that I threw out last week was just getting ready, getting healthy myself as a grandpa and having no more excuses. I got to get dialed in. And so that's a journey that I've begun. And so lots of, and we've had some great coaches in between too from the junior ranks. And we're excited today with our guest that we got on the show today, someone that you've known for a long time and myself as well.
And we kind of had to wait for golf season to end, right? There was lots of that in order for us to get him in here. Had to kind of wait for a rainy day. And so it's fantastic. So can I introduce him?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay? Yeah. So I'm excited to, introduce Loren Molleken. And Loren, we call him Mooner. Lots of people know him as Mooner, Loren Molleken. Loren's got a distinguished resume. Apologize from, his time coaching here throughout Saskatchewan. Started with the Swift Current Indians. Went on numerous years, about 16 seasons in the Western Hockey League. I think the second coach ever to hit the 600 win mark in the WHL, over 1,000 games coached. Spent some time coaching in the NHL. Got to coach Mario Lemieux. Got to be the head coach of one of the original 6 franchises in the Chicago Blackhawks, and then we had the privilege somehow to have Loren join us for 5 seasons with the Prairie Hockey Academy, and it's been an honor to say that he's a friend, to be able to coach and to learn from him, to sit on a bus and hear stories, and to have him here today for our listeners to talk about some stories and some learnings and some leadership lessons from Loren is a real treat. So Loren, just want to welcome you to the Weighted Podcast. Thanks for coming to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Lots of excitement this time of year. NHL camps are wrapping up, and the regular season. Everyone's got their hockey pools all sorted out and who they're going to pick. And there's this kid in Chicago. He down the road here last year in Regina, but he's lighted up already and doing a great job with Mr. Bedard. It must be something special for you being a former head coach with Chicago to see a young guy like that go in and stir up an old franchise.
For sure. I think that, he's such a natural talent. I remember watching him out in Penticton in the final playoffs that the Sports School League has out there. And I think at that time he might have been 14 years old playing against 17-year-olds, and he was unbelievable, some of the things that he was doing on the ice. But we heard and watched him play, and his time that he spent with the Regina Pats obviously was pretty special for everyone in the Western Hockey League. As we all know, just about every building was sold out after Christmas last year to watch him play, and he's certainly worth the price of admission. And when Chicago won the lottery, I was a pretty happy camper. Their franchise and team had struggled for a while, and so the excitement obviously is back in Chicago, and he's got off to a good start here in the exhibition season, and I think that he'll do a tremendous job there. Everybody is waiting to see if he's going to be the real thing, but I think that he'll prove to everyone that he is exactly that.
Yeah, and you've had, you've mentioned both Regina and Chicago. Those are both stops that you've had in your coaching career. But even prior to your, great career as a coach, you had a great career as a player, right? Like you've had a chance to go through the junior ranks here in Saskatchewan with Swift Current and Lethbridge and, a few other stops, I'm sure, in between. But then it was off to the, the International League, the American League, into the NHL. And then transitioning to the coaching world. And so, for a lot of our listeners out there, all of the coaching guests that we've had on the show have all had that journey, right? Like Barney up in Humboldt, he went from being an NHL player to a coach that's probably going to coach in the NHL one day, to Klamosko being a guy that, had a lot of success as a player, and now he's having great success in Battleford as a coach. You were on that same path. You had a great playing career as a goaltender. In fact, you're enshrined in a few of those spots in their Hall of Fames. And then to make that transition to a coach, can you just talk us through some of those things of the moment you maybe realized, your playing days might be up and you're going to pick up the clipboard and the whistle and start coaching?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's a long story, and I can remember as a young lad growing up in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, and the Weyburn Red Wings were the only team in the world in my eyes. And I was fortunate enough, probably at 12 or 13, to be the stick boy. And the coach at that time was Stan Dunn, who went on to coach the Swift Current Broncos. And a few years later, I belonged to the Regina Pats, and I got traded over to Swift Current, I believe, when I was about 15 years old. And and Stan was the coach, and probably that connection from being the stick boy and knowing the family and different things like that afforded me the opportunity in Swift Current. And it was a lot of fun there. It was a smaller city, as we all know, but we had the great players like Tiger Williams and Terry Ruskowski and Don Laraway, and it was 1974 when we lost out to the Regina Pats. I believe it was in the semifinals, and they went on to win the Memorial Cup that year. They had the likes of Dennis Sobchuk and Clark Gillies and Mike Wanchuk, and so. And a year or two later, the team had moved to Lethbridge, and half a year in there, then I was traded over to the Winnipeg Clubs. So that's where I finished out my junior days playing, and certainly my last year I'd blown out my knee and didn't get drafted, but I was afforded the opportunity at that time to go to the Atlanta Flames training camp, and from there I went on. That year I played for the famous Philadelphia Firebirds in the old North American Hockey League, and it's interesting because that was the league that they made the movie Slapshot from. So a lot of the guys that played on our team and played throughout that league were in that movie. I was just a year too late, or else I probably would have been in there. But anyways, it was interesting, and so from there I ended up going to the International League, and Greg Pilling was our coach in Philadelphia, and he went on to coach in Fort Wayne, Indiana, for the Fort Wayne Comets. And I went over, and at that time Vancouver was supplying players there, and so there wasn't enough room for me. So I was dealt over to Saginaw, Michigan, and I played there. And at that time, it was one of Los Angeles Kings' farm team, and we had a real good season. And that year, I had signed a 5-year contract with LA, and everything was going in the right direction. And the following year, I played in the American Hockey League on their number one team, and so we bounced around there. But I had a demon or a problem, which was alcohol. And when I look back today, that probably kept me out of the NHL. I just wasn't I didn't have the commitment that I really needed to have, and certainly it cost me because I got myself into some trouble off the ice, and my contract was null and void, and so I basically sat out a whole winter and didn't do anything. And I remember sitting at home and really had nothing, and got a phone call from Jimmy Dallavano, who at that time was the assistant general manager of the New York Islanders. And it's funny because I can remember him saying, Lorne, we know that you've had a checkered past, but we want to give you another opportunity. And I didn't have anything. And I remember going to Kyle's Sporting Goods in Regina. At that time, Bill Hickey owned it. And Bill said, just go in the store and you pick out whatever goal equipment you want. And away I went to the New York Islanders training camp. And so that there was another opportunity that I didn't want to pass up on. And certainly if people wouldn't or hadn't given me, a second and third opportunity, I wouldn't be sitting here with you guys today. So there's lots of people along the way that I'm very thankful for. In those years, the Islanders were winning the Stanley Cups. Their number one farm team in Indianapolis was winning championships, and I ended up playing in Toledo, Ohio, for the Toledo Gold Diggers, and we had won the Turner Cup there 2 out of the 3 years, and had a tremendous time. I mean, still to this day, I have a lot of friends. We've had reunions and different things with that team because of the championships. But and I was fortunate enough there to, just this past year, be inducted into the Toledo Hockey Hall of Fame with a lot of players that have played there since the early 50s. And so it was a real honor to go back and receive that. And it's something that I'll always be extremely fond of.
Yeah. I remember seeing that. We got to watch the induction video with you, Lorne, and that was really special. I mean, there's a lot of great things said about your character and who you are and who you were at your time with Toledo. And it was also pretty neat to just hear them talk about some of, we just had Chase Coward on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he would talk a little about you guys bantering back and forth at the stand-up goalie versus the butterfly, and but just to even hear some of those save records that you had there, and to watch the playoffs. And you guys went to the Turner Cup, and I think there was the big banner right hung across the back end of the arena where only the Lord saves more than Mooner, and boy, did that give us a good laugh. And pretty neat to hear them just speak about your character from the different individuals talk about. Just it was the Zamboni driver and it was the gate attendant, and they came and spoke a little bit about who Loren Molleken was. And I wonder a little bit, did that character piece inside of you develop after that phone call from Jimmy? Because episode 9, I talked a little bit about how we started Prairie Hockey Academy, and I had a man that kind of reached into my life, and I called it a bit of a mentorship. And whether he knew he was doing that intentionally or not, we wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for that conversation I had with him. And I noticed that was kind of a big turning point in my character and my decision making as well. And so, just as you talk about Jimmy, who wrote a great book called The Road to Hockeytown, I mean, he gave the Detroit Red Wings a second chance as well in a lot of ways. But what kind of did that seed kind of get planted with that phone call from Jimmy?
Well, after not playing the game that you grew up playing and the game you loved because of some mistakes that I had made off the ice, I was given another chance, and I didn't want to let that get away. And so I made the necessary commitments that I had to as a hockey player. I was married young to my wife, Patsy, as we are still hanging in there today.
Yeah.
And so, my whole life changed, and I had a tremendous group of men to play hockey with. We had a tremendous leader in our coach, Billy Inglis, who we were just together here, less than a year ago, and it was awesome to see everyone back for that reunion. But it was another opportunity, and I didn't want it to go or waste it. And certainly like I said, I was very fortunate to play on some really good teams, and we had some guys on our team that were just tremendous leaders, and they would do whatever they had to do on the ice, but more importantly off the ice to help you, succeed, and just little things that they did all the time, and so that's what really made that group so special, and we had lots of great players. Probably the greatest player that we had in our team was Dirk Graham, who went on to captain the Chicago Blackhawks for years, and to this day, Dirk is a pro scout for the San Jose Sharks. So, and it's you cross paths with so many people that had an influence on you, and certainly, going from a player to a coach. I think back to my coaches, one like we just talked about, Billy Inglis, Loren Henning, who played his junior hockey out west here in Estevan and coached for many, many years at the NHL level. And, so it goes on, and there's been a lot of real special stops in my coaching career, and probably none more than the Moose Jaw Warriors.
Yeah.
And talk about that journey. Like you had a great experience and second chances of, as a player, and then at that pivot point, moving from being a player to stepping into the coaching world with Swift Current first of all, and then into Moose Jaw. But talk about that transition. And really what it meant to you. You've highlighted right now, just saying like Moose Jaw was a real pivotal point in your coaching career, but talk about that. What does that mean to you, and what did Moose Jaw mean to you at that point?
Well, it's interesting because I still had 2 years, I believe, left in my playing contract with the Minnesota North Stars, and my one knee was so bad, and a young fellow that I'd played with in Toledo and in Springfield, his name was Scott Housen. And today Scott Housen is the president and CEO of the American Hockey League, and we were always really, really tight. Scott was a completely different person than I was, but he was always there to make sure that I didn't get in too much trouble off the ice. I remember sitting down with him and basically saying, you know what, Scott, I think this is going to be it for me. My knee's bugging me, and it's pretty painful to play the game anymore. And so he had helped me, and we put this resume together. And next thing you know, I was coaching with the Swift Current Indians back in the old Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, and so it was good. And then I got my opportunity to go to the Weyburn Red Wings to coach there, and that was a dream. I mean, that was growing up. That
your
was
hometown.
yeah. Right. So, but yeah, and then I had an opportunity to come to Moose Jaw. Jerry James, who had coached the Estevan Bruins and the Yorkton Terriers for many years, was hired here in Moose Jaw, and I came with him as his assistant coach. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long with Jerry, but our governor and president at that time was Barry Webster, who everyone in the Moose Jaw area knows exactly who Barry is, and he had hired Greg Quisley to come in to be the head coach and general manager, and I can remember. Greg and Barry walking into the coach's office one day, and things weren't going very well, attendance-wise or financially, and that previous summer, I think they basically knocked door to door to try to save this franchise, and I can remember coming in and Greg saying, "You know what, Loren, I want you to take over as head coach because there's so many other things that I have to focus on." And I can remember Barry Webster looking at me and saying, I think we had lost like 10 games in a row, and he looking right at me and says, "Now it's your win-loss record, whether you're here next year or not." So I said, "Thanks a lot." But you know what? Greg made some great trades, and after Christmas, I just forget how many points we were out, but I think it was the last game of the year. We scored an overtime goal. I believe it was Paul Dick, a defenseman, who's now coaching in the Manitoba Junior League.
Steinbach, yep.
And we made the playoffs, but the old Crush Can was packed. I mean, they were standing 4 deep behind the glass, and it was an unbelievable place. The whole city was behind the team, and we went on to beat Medicine Hat, and eventually we lost out to Swift Current, and they went on to win the Memorial Cup that year. But that's what made Moose Jaw so special. I mean, just the people, the way that the city treated the players, the way that everybody just rallied around the franchise, and so those are memories that I'll never ever forget. And from there, it was kind of in between whether I would come back to Moose Jaw or not, and I ended up getting hired in Saskatoon, and again another great place to play. The ownership, the Brodsky family were tremendous. They were very supportive, and we had lots of success in Saskatoon. Yeah. We lost out 2 out of the 4 years in the 7th game to the Kamloops Blazers, and they went on to win the Memorial Cup. So lots of great memories there, and I was fortunate enough a couple of years ago to get inducted into the Builders banner there. And so, you know what, without second and third opportunities from a lot of people, and people believing in your ability, and great people to work with, and tremendous players. I look back on it and I'm very, very thankful.
Yeah, it's exciting. You bring up Jerry James, and it just dawned on me now that I was probably your stick boy at one point, because when I grew up in Estevan, so I grew up disliking anyone and any team from Weyburn, but was stick boy with Jerry, and Dennis Scott was our trainer, and Denzai was a brilliant guy to work with. But whenever there was a visiting team that come over from Lloyd or Swift or whatever, Denzai would always send me over to be the stick boy for the visiting team. And so I'm sure a couple of times when you were with Swift Current there in Estevan that I was filling bottles and hauling sticks to the bench for you guys. So I'll never forget, like, Estevan had won the championship the year before with Jerry as head coach, and then when he went to Moose Jaw, Estevan was just devastated to see such a solid coach and mentor to leave the city there. And so it's kind of cool how it dovetails in with you and how you got to experience that time as well.
Yeah, there's lots of different things. I remember going to Jerry's house in Moose Jaw here for lunch, and his wife Marg worked in the office, and we'd go over and we'd have our lunch. But I'd look at some of the pictures on the wall and be Jerry playing for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, right. And they had leather helmets. And I said, "Well, no wonder you're so crazy." I said, but yeah, no, there's lots of stories, and like I say. I worked with a lot of different coaches over the years that I learned a tremendous amount from, and when you really think about it, it's the coaching, and my philosophy was always to try to treat people the right way, and probably the biggest compliment I ever got from players was, "You're a player's coach." And, back in the day, I really didn't know what that meant. But today, with everything that's going on in the hockey world, feels pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Who, as you think back over that time, whether it was in the Western League with Saskatoon or Regina and the Memorial Cup runs and stuff like that, or in your time in San Jose, Chicago, Pittsburgh, who are some of the real leadership players and character dudes that you had the opportunity to coach and just look back on that with great fondness and real blessings?
Well, there's a number, Barrett, a number of players that I was fortunate enough to coach, but even to this day, I'm involved in 2 group chats. One with ex-Moose Jaw Warriors and one with ex-Saskatoon Blades. And it's quite comical, except when that phone starts beeping and ringing at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, right? But, I can remember back, in junior hockey, there was so many of the players that I coached that I'm friends with today. Mm-hmm. And, I talk about a young guy by the name of Scott Reed, who played here for the Moose Jaw Warriors. Another player was Glenn Gullickson, who's an assistant coach with the Edmonton Oilers right now. And I remember Glenn, went on to go for a scholarship, and he had played an exhibition game or something and was disqualified. But he ended up being traded to Saskatoon from Brandon as an overage, and he became our captain there. So his leadership skills were tremendous. I mean, he wasn't a great player, but he found a way to get things done, not only on the ice but off the ice. And the way he supported, his teammates was something that I always look back on. And I can go on and on about different players, and certainly, a guy like Dirk Graham, who we talked about earlier. I mean, he's another guy that basically was going to quit playing hockey, and 2 or 3 years later, he's captain of the Chicago Blackhawks, and winning Selke awards, and just doing a lot of different things. So, but you know what? The players were always very, very special. And certainly the efforts and the commitment that they put forward is something that I'll always remember. I mean, you look at a lot of the different coaches and leaders that, like I was fortunate enough to coach with Daryl Sutter in San Jose. And Daryl, now there's things being said about him in Calgary and so on and so forth. But the one thing about Daryl and the whole Sutter family, for that matter, I mean, when you walk through the door at the rink, you come to work. Mm-hmm. You right. Put your best, and then business is business. But away from the rink, Daryl, he'd give you the shirt off his back. That's just the type of person he was. So, I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of great coaches that helped me along the way, and a lot of great players with a lot of leadership skills and abilities. So,
you obviously spent some time with the San Jose Sharks and with Daryl, and you had a stop for I think 2 seasons with the Pittsburgh Penguins as an assistant coach.
I was in Pittsburgh for 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
I coached Eddie Olchuk in Chicago.
Yeah,
and Eddie was at the end of his career, and I remember exactly. We were sitting at the owner of the team, that was the Wirtz family, who still owned the Chicago Blackhawks, but Mr. Wirtz was still alive, and we were sitting around the boardroom and talking about free agency and different things, and Eddie Olchuk's name came up, and I said, "Let's sign him." Well, I was probably the only one but Eddie ended up, getting to finish out his playing career with the Chicago Blackhawks, where it was his hometown and everything. And and the next year he had went on to coach the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I just come to Moose Jaw at that time with Curtis Hunt, and I became the general manager, and Eddie had called and said, "I'd like you to come to Pittsburgh as my assistant." And he said, "Craig Patrick will give you a call." And next thing you know, I was off to Nashville to meet with him. And one thing led to another, and ended up in Pittsburgh. And it was an interesting year. I mean, our team had its struggles, but Mario Lemieux had decided that he was going to come back and try to play again. I believe he played about half that year, but
right.
One of my favorite stories about Mario was part of my responsibility was to work the power play. And being a goalie, what do I know about the power play? But anyways, that's why I was fortunate to learn from a lot of good coaches.
Right.
But I remember Mario saying, "Loren, what did they do on that penalty kill?" I said, "Mario, I have no idea. I was just watching you." So we got a chuckle out of that. But he was a tremendous person, and was a lot of fun to be around, and But that year was pretty rewarding. And then obviously we had drafted Marc-Andre Fleury that year, and Mark was with us for half the year and went on to the World Junior and then went back to junior. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then that's when I decided an opportunity came up to come back to Saskatoon and coach. And I think it was 12 or 13 years I was there before it was time to move on.
Right. That's right. Great story about Mario. But I mean, as a young coach for myself, you told me a story a few years back about just, sometimes as an assistant coach, your job is to, at the end of practice, maybe do some accessory work or get maybe the healthy scratches or even the injury to do some skill development work and different things. And you just said sometimes there was a little bit of that pushback in Pittsburgh with a couple guys that you couldn't get them to maybe do some of the drills, or they just weren't interested in some of the extra work. And you told me you called Mario over and asked him to do the drill, and they all watched. And next thing you know, they're all lining up waiting to do the drill as well, right?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, you'd always, part of being an assistant coach is exactly that. I mean, the game has evolved a lot more today. Okay. But, a lot of times after practice, you would work, like you mentioned, Justin, on the skill development and different things. And it was interesting. I mean, one of our goalies, it was J.S. Aubin, I believe, or J.P. Aubin. He kind of reminded me of myself back in my earlier day, not a great work ethic. And I remember putting him through some drills in the crease and doing different things. And he went in and he's laying on the trainer's table, and Mario came over and said, "What did you do to him?" That type of thing. But it was interesting because the year that I was the assistant coach in San Jose, one of our defensemen was Gary Suter, a Hall of Famer and in the U.S. And Doug Wilson was, I believe, our director of player personnel at that time, and Doug went on to be general manager there for years in the Hall of Fame, played for Chicago Blackhawks and so on and so forth. But, I'd sat down and I'd picked his brain, and he said to me, "You know what, Lorne, what you should try to do, if you can convince Gary Suter to come and be the first guy in line in those practice drills, you'll find out the rest of the guys will follow right in." And that's exactly what happened. So, that's the leadership skill that you talk about in some of the individuals that you coach. And I mean, that was the beauty about that. I mean, everybody was on the same page, and, it made my job as an assistant coach a lot easier. And sure, it was easy for me to help the goalies or whatever, but, at that time, our two goalies there were Evgeny Nabokov and Mika Kipasov. Right. And our goalie coach was the great Warren Strelo, who was the goalie coach for the U.S. Olympic team when they won the gold medal way, way back with Herb Brooks. So I just stayed out of the way then. Right. But, that was part of my responsibility to work with the defensemen. And so once you got, a player like Gary Suter on your side, things just seemed to fall into place. And you know what, it's when I first got hired, with Chicago, I went to Chicago as an assistant coach with Dirk Graham, and things didn't work out, and I took over on an interim basis as the head coach. But that was very difficult for me because Dirk and I had played minor pro together. We had won championships together, and it didn't work out there. I mean, Dirk obviously was a great captain for the Chicago Blackhawks, and I remember we're sitting down in the coach's room, myself, Dennis Savard, Trent Yanni, and Dirk Graham. And Bob Murray was our general manager at that time, and he'd walked in and he called Dirk outside, and Dirk come back in, was a little bit emotional, and they'd released him, and next thing you know, I got called outside. So I figured, well, start packing the suitcases, and he said, "Mr. Wirtz would like you to take over on an interim basis." And I said, "I'm not doing nothing until I talk to Dirk." So when I went and talked to Dirk, and he had said to me, "You know what, Mooner?" He said, "I told those guys to hire you before they hired me, because I was coaching the Edmonton Oilers farm team that time in Hamilton." and things, went very well there for us, and so we did that, and our first game was against St. Louis, and we get on the flight over to St. Louis. I remember Chris Chelios coming up to me and saying, I'd like to talk to you for a couple of minutes when we get to St. Louis. And I said, okay, fine. And he came over, and I mean, he was there for probably an hour, if I remember right. And all he said is, we're here to help you. We want you to succeed as a coach. So tap into our knowledge. And we had, the Doug Gilmores, the Chris Chelios, the Tony Amontes, the Alexei Zamnovs. I mean, we had a group of players that have been around the NHL for a long time, and sure, and they were very supportive, and bang, things seemed to go pretty well. And the next thing you know, I think I was sitting in Boston or New Jersey, wherever it was, and longtime coach of the Chicago Blackhawks, his name was Billy Ray. And a lot of the young listeners probably wouldn't know who he is today, but back in the original six, he was the coach of the Chicago Blackhawks, and he used to come to every home game, and he'd sit up 3 or 4 rows behind, and with his little hat on, but Mr. Wirtz would always send a limousine to pick him up and bring him to the games and so on and so forth. So he calls me and he said, Loren, he said, I just left Mr. Wirtz's office. He's going to remove the interim tag, and he's going to offer you this much money, but ask for more, he said. I said, okay. But I can remember in Chicago, because of, the traffic and different things, I would go over if it was late afternoon and sit with him and his wife and have tea and cookies, and we'd talk about hockey and different things. So I was so fortunate to sit with so many people throughout my career and talk about a lot of different things. And so, like I said, I was very fortunate and very blessed to have some special people in my life.
That's great. I mean, leadership is all about influence, and you've been heavily influenced by, stories you've already told us here, by some great people you've had a chance to coach with or play with and against. And as we've seen the game change over the last 5, 6, 7 years in terms of just, some more accountability and some changes in terms of how culture is starting to shift in sports, not just in hockey. Your journey kind of shifted, and you got involved with Prairie Hockey Academy, and just wanted to kind of pick your brains about, how does a guy who, goes to, one of the more successful coaches in the Western League and then into the NHL, coaching guys like Mario Lemieux, go to working with 14-year-old kids in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. Like, talk about that journey and what it's meant for you to be involved at Prairie Hockey Academy. Well,
I think, first of all, is friendship. I remember sitting in Mexico and getting a phone call from a friend of mine, Bob Calvert, and God rest his soul, but he said to me, Mooner, he said, my grandson's playing out at Prairie Hockey Academy, and they need a coach. I said, Prairie Hockey Academy, what is that? And so he went on to explain that Justin had started this academy, and at that time there was 2 teams. There was the under 17 and the Elite 15, I think it was called at that time. Yeah. And I said, Bob, I got no interest of coaching a bunch of 15-year-old kids, right? So we had come back from holidays, and he kept, you got to come out and just have a look. And he said, I'm going to get Justin Simpkins to give you a call. And also Lloyd Friesen had mentioned it to me, who's, had taught out there and different things.
Well, he was coaching it was called midget varsity.
The midget varsity team. He was coaching. So anyways, to make a long story short, I talked to Justin on the telephone, and so we had arranged, I would come out and watch a practice, and and go to the cafeteria and have our famous lunch and different things like that.
Lemon cake. Luckily, lemon cake was served that day.
And so anyways, you know, I had an opportunity. Justin took me in and introduced me to the kids. And I said to Justin, you know what, after talking to Justin and what his vision was and different things like that, and because to be real honest with you, Barrett, I think that, you know, I'd coached out in Vancouver and that year wasn't a lot of fun. And it kind of left a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. But, you know, and then I was away from it for a while, but I missed it. You know, you miss being around a team. You miss being around the hockey environment, because to me it's very, very special and it's very sacred. Mm-hmm. And so I said to Justin, I'm going to go home, talk to my wife and see what she says. She said, you know what, you go right ahead. And to this day, it's one of the best things I've ever did as far as hockey goes, because of the way the kids are treated, just the whole environment out at Caronport, at Briarcrest, it's incredible. And you know, when I leave there at the end of the day, I feel pretty good about myself. Just being around that environment, that culture, the people that are there, the way they carry themselves, the things that they do, not only for the players of PHA, but for all students. Mm-hmm. It's an unbelievable place. And so to this day, you know, I've enjoyed my time there. I've had lots of fun. I've met lots of great people and created some long-lasting friendships.
Yeah, it's been... we've learned a pile, right, Loren? And I'm so grateful that that you said yes to coming out and touring that day, and we had a good talk. I remember watching that practice with you and the conversations, and I even remember introducing you to the players. And I remember afterwards, like, he's the new coach, isn't he? He's the new coach, right, Justin? That guy. Why would you even bring him here if he's not? It's like, well, we don't know yet. He's just a friend, but it was, you know, you've played a significant impact and big part of Prairie Hockey Academy's history and its development in your role as, you know, a head coach, and then, you know, choosing to you came to me the next year and said, Justin, I want to coach again, but I actually want, you know, Micah to be the head coach because I want to mentor him. And you're really intentional with your choice in that, and so I know Micah's grateful for that. We're all grateful for that, and you've continued to kind of have that influence on a lot of guys' lives out there. And so that's been really unique. Even that team, you know, that Elite 15 team that we had that season, it was a 2003 birth year. You know, here we are in Moose Jaw. We've talking lots about the Moose Jaw Warriors. You had a large impact on a lot of those athletes' lives. And that team, you know, no doubt from the influence of the group of everybody that was working with them, and you played no small part in that. A lot of them have gone on some pretty cool careers already. You know, one's in the AHL. I think 3 of them are playing Division I hockey in the NCAA this year. Atlee Calvert set a record for Moose Jaw-born player for the Moose Jaw Warriors to score 43 goals, I think 42 or 43 goals last year in the Western League. And Nathan Aries down in Minnesota, Chase Cowards in Prince Albert. I mean, both those goalies you developed that year, I thought that was neat. I remember both their dads saying, this is great. Our son has never had a coach who was a goalie before. And so that it was big, but that was that initial team. And, you know, we could continue to count the alumni from that forward that you coached too, but it was a special year and it's been fun to build on it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember coming to coach. We had, I think it was a showcase or whatever the tournament was called at home.
That's right. Yeah, we hosted a tournament.
Yeah, we hosted a tournament, and we ended up winning the tournament. We scored a goal, and I believe it was Atlee Calvert that scored the winning goal in a shootout for us to win the tournament. Well, yeah. I'll tell you what, that put the fun back in the game for me right there. We're seeing the looks on those kids' faces, and, you know, getting the banner and the kids skating around with it. It was unbelievable and something I'll always remember.
Now, neat part, Ethan Peters and Atlee Calvert were on that team, but Jason Peters and Jeff Calvert happened to be on a team that you coached in years previous as well.
Moose Jaw, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's how old I am. Yeah, no, it goes full circle, doesn't it? It's
pretty neat.
Yeah, it was, and you know, that's probably the biggest reason. I mean, Atlee's grandpa Bob is how I ended up out at at Caronport and with PHA. So, we miss him every day. I know he was a big booster of the program, and obviously there's a room named after him. I mean, Justin was so generous in building first class facility out for these kids and the Badgers Den. I mean, I remember when the whole family came out that day. So it was kind of neat. It's kind of special, and it's nice to see Prairie hockey develop into 4 teams now. I mean, I know that you had a dream as a young guy when you first started it, and it's come basically full circle now, and it's a real credit to everyone that's involved out there. And I mean, the coaching staff is second to none. The way that they treat the players, the way they prepare the players, it's unbelievable out there the way things are done. I mean, it's done in a real first class way, and number one priority is the development of those young men, not only as hockey player, but more importantly as people.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, we're sort of coming to the end of our show today, but before we let you go, I'd love to get just kind of maybe 3 areas of advice. We do a segment of Guide and Provide that we like to help young parents and young players, and then even some young coaches out. So when it comes to some advice that you would present to a young player, what would be some nugget that you would maybe drop on them today to give them sort of that little bit of a pep in their step as they're going into the beginning of their season?
Well, I think the biggest thing, I'm fortunate enough now to watch my granddaughter play hockey in the under 9 level, but I watched. I mean, these kids when they're that young. I mean, some of them had no idea how to hold a hockey stick or just different things like that. But is to always believe in yourself, always try hard, and always have fun at it, because that's the important part for me, especially at a young age. And the more the harder you try, or the more you work at it, you're gonna improve. And I mean, all parents probably have a dream someday that their son or their daughter is going to go move on to play in the Olympics or the NHL or whatever it may be. But for a young person, it's just to enjoy it, because being involved with a team and having fun is something that you'll always look back at. Right.
And for those parents that you alluded to, what is some wisdom to help them navigate, their kids maybe made a AA team, or, they're at an academy, or maybe unfortunately they didn't make the team that they thought their son or daughter was going to play on, and now they've had to, maybe in their mind, if they're living vicariously through their child, they had to settle now playing house hockey or whatever. What is some advice that you'd give to that parent as they sort of guide their son or daughter through the sport?
I think the biggest thing is to listen to their son or daughter, because sometimes it isn't as enjoyable for them as it is for you as a parent. So right. Listen to what their heart is saying or what their voice is saying, and try to support them in the best way possible. And it's all part of their growth and development, being in a positive environment, in an environment that they're learning and they're being creative and those types of things. But probably to a parent is to listen to your young one, and I mean, obviously the guidance and support that you give to them as parents is critical, and always find the positive, always, because nobody likes to get beat up. Right. Yeah. We would say in the old days, you know what I mean? You have to find a way to make them feel good about themselves, win, lose, or draw.
Mm-hmm. And then one last piece of advice, we're already looking forward to next year in terms of players that we would want to, consider and invite to be part of Prairie Hockey Academy, as someone that's been an influencer in the game as a player, as a coach, now as a mentor, what advice or what would you say to someone that's considering Prairie Hockey Academy as an option for their U15, U17, U18, season a year from now? Like if they're sitting there pondering it and they're on the fence, they're like, well, I just don't know if I, maybe want to stay home, or I want to, what is it to you that you've seen at Prairie Hockey that you would tell that young man or young woman to say, Prairie's a place that you need to be?
Well, I mean, over the years, I've talked to a number of parents about, being a part of PHA, and for me, like I said earlier, it's a very special place. 1, 2, the staff is incredible. The kids are number one. I mean, that's the number one priority, and from the skill development to their overall development, to their off-ice development, to the schooling. I mean, it's second to none. And it is a very special place to be. And hey, let's face it, it costs some money to go there. But to me, it's the development as a person, as a player, and just, like I said, it's a great environment, and the culture out there is perfect. So I think that for parents or young people that are thinking about it, obviously, they should take a hard, long look at it. And number one, just drive out and have a visit, see what it's all about, so you can see it yourself. And I know you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that'd be advice I'd actually give to other coaches and other general managers that are coaching junior and other scouts and agents. To me, one of the things that blew me away when Justin was courting me to come out and be part of the academy was, like you said, Loren, the people and then the facilities, and having those two stitched together. It really is an oasis in the middle of the prairies that is doing some remarkable things. You've had a piece in it in terms of your involvement. Justin, of course, you've been the man that's had the vision behind it. And so I just, it sounds like we're really pumping the tires today on PHA, and it needs to.
It's deserving.
It is deserving when you get out and about and you're traveling around and you see other programs in other cities and different places, and some of the things that kids are going through today. Man, as a recruitment thing, I'd say that PHA needs student athletes, but I think student athletes need PHA like that. Without coming out and getting a feel for it and meeting the people, you don't understand that statement. But when you do, the lights go on and you're like, really, you know what? This isn't expensive. It's actually great value, and for the development of my son and daughter. And so I guess if that's our tire pumping and promotion for PHA today, then so be it, because it really is a remarkable place. And really thankful, Loren, that you've taken time out of your schedule to be here today. And more importantly, taking time out of your life to invest into Justin and into the program. And, you continue to have influence on people's lives. Obviously, if they're still including you in the Blades and Warriors group chats, that it wasn't just about the power play and penalty kill. It was about how you influence lives. And so we're thankful that you've taken the time today to be part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just in closing, for any of our listeners too, that maybe haven't had the chance to meet Mooner before, he referenced different things, and Eddie Olchuk calling him to be an assistant coach, Dirk Graham, those relationships, Scott Housen. And I think what, a big takeaway for me is that just your character matters, right? And your relationships in life. And hockey is a really small, example of that, because it's such a small community in so many ways. But it's, if you're a young athlete today or a family member or anything, that we talk lots about character on this podcast. We talk about the development of it. One of our 3 pillars of the academy is that character is a skill, right? Which means that you can develop character just like stick handling or the butterfly or stand-up goaltending even. These are skills you can develop. And so, but they matter, and your relationships matter, and they follow you where you go. And my first trip to Penticton for playoffs with Mooner, it took us 30 minutes to get into the arena. I couldn't walk 20 steps without, somebody, Mooner, what are you doing here? And and just because we were in this hockey circle with all these scouts and Western Hockey League general managers and things, and because his character and his relationships were valued so greatly, people wanted to go out of their way to come across the parking lot to see him and shake his hand. And so thanks for being a great example of that for our student athletes. I know you come with that message all the time to them about what scouts are looking for. And it's not the fastest skater and the guy that scores the goal. It's the leadership and the character. And so appreciate you taking the time today, Loren. I know you fill a lot of big shoes, right? How many years have you and Patsy been married now?
Long time.
That's right. And I mean, beautiful granddaughters. And I know you're playing a big role in their life and in all of ours. So appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today.
Real pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.